Okay. So we're going to identify variations in building envelope design based on climate zone. We'll simulate thermal and moisture migration in various envelope systems. We will measure moisture levels in envelope materials over simulated timeframes, and we will recognize health hazards and material moisture content. So we're going to do this simulation with a software package called WUFI, W-U-F-I. This was developed by the Department of Energy with the, I want to say it's out of their group on the West Coast in California. I can't remember. I think it's Oak Ridge. That's Knoxville. Okay. So they developed this engine, this code, and just like all the software they develop it, when they do, it's really hard to use. It's like a text interface, and so then they license it out to people who want to develop interfaces for it. And so this particular, well, it's the only one that exists to my knowledge, is a company out of Germany that took the engine and created this interface for it. So let's go ahead and go right to WUFI. So WUFI, this is the home screen. This is the project screen, and so you'll fill all this out. I'm not going to go through it, but you can add a picture of your project and so forth and put it in here. And then the next step is you go to your climate. Although it's the third one on the list here, I always go to the climate next. And this is to analyze envelopes. So you can walls, ceiling, roof structures, floor structures, any part of an envelope you can simulate and measure moisture and temperature migration through the assembly. And so the first thing we'll want to do is select a weather map, because we want it to simulate the rain patterns for the area. We want it to simulate the fluctuations in temperature and humidity, and so all that has to come from a weather file. And so I'm going to, on the outdoor climate tab, I'm going to select climate, and I'm going to pick Norfolk. So it selects North America, Norfolk, and ASHRAE year 1. I'm not sure what the differences are in these years. I've never actually even looked at that, so I can't answer that right now. But the default is year 1. So then you just select that, and then it'll show you your temperature, your relative humidity, and for Norfolk, for a recorded 1-year history. So you can zoom in on these and look at it over the period of a day, or even if you want to get more specific than that, you can get down to pretty small time clips. Okay.
You think the other ones are like 2 years and 3 years of this?
No, no, because somewhere else will select the number of years that we're going to run the simulation. So here you can just sort of look and understand what your temperature ranges are for the climate that you're looking at. And then there's a climate analysis button, and this little climate analysis will show you your solar radiation sums, and this is a year-round, a full year analysis. It'll show you your driving rain. So in Norfolk, our driving rain primarily comes from the Northeast, so we can validate that. So the weather file has the rain in it as well. All right, and so then
Jimmy, can you explain that solar radiation?
So it's BTUs per square foot, and I don't understand why it's no. I can't tell you. If there were a building on there, I could tell you something about it, but the fact that it's just a blank circle, I'm not sure. Does anybody have any idea? Anybody on the phone?
Well, green is the highest values,
Right,
and this is south facing.
right.
And it's just showing you the values that saw how much solar radiation gain you're going to have based on that orientation.
Based on that orientation, that makes sense. Yeah, so you're going to get the majority of your sun from the direct south, and you'll get some even west and northwest. So that, yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
I guess in some bizarre location that would be different, but
I mean, it seems like it'd be. Well, I think what's important about this is the BTUs per square foot.
Yeah, so good.
Compare that.
So
Okay, so
Norfolk's high is 512. Pick something down like on the equator. We can. We'll go to Florida.
Yeah, you can.
No, that's too
Wouldn't
close.
it would be
Go to Key West.
down
hey,
Norfolk's about the same as Spain. Well, it's
Go to Key West.
Yeah.
So the value shot up.
yeah. So you actually get considerable. You can get like 500 BTUs per square foot, even north of west from down there. So you were right, Richard. I think that's exactly what it is. I'm gonna go back to Norfolk.
I don't think you use that for anything other than it feeds probably into the program. This value.
Yeah.
start for Richard.
So we're back to Norfolk. And then we're going to look at the indoor side. So this is the indoor temperature and relative humidity based on some standard. And so it's got fluctuations for temperature and humidity over that 1 year period. So this is going to, depending on if you're doing like an attic is on your other side, you know, then you would have temperatures that would fluctuate with the outdoor air temperature. If you're doing a residential space, that temperature would be pretty constant on the indoor climate, the right side. And then there are different ways different standards that you can use here. ASHRAE 160, but these temperatures are, you know, they're not realistic for like the inside, the dry side of a residential application. And then I like the sine curves myself because you can limit these. You can set them over here on the right. You can choose your moisture load on the inside. So if you're doing like a pool, or if you're doing something like a field house where there are a bunch of showers, possibly, or a kitchen, a commercial kitchen, you would have a lot of moisture content in the air. So when you get to that point, you have to, I'm going to use a medium moisture load. You would look at your, you would just use common sense, or you could look up ASHRAE, some ASHRAE standards, and they would give you a range of temperature and humidity over a day time frame, a 24-hour time frame. So let's stick with the sine curve, and I'm going to use a medium moisture load for the space with a 50% relative humidity and a mean value of basically 70 degrees. So you set up your temperature, we've done, you know, your climate, your indoor temperature, we've done that. And then the next one is control. So here you want to look at how long do you want to run this simulation for. So we ran, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years ago, we did Richard, it might have been on one of your projects, we did a simulation, it was one of your projects, where it looked fine over a 1 year period. All the materials looked like they were, you know, fairly dry, but there was just this slight increase in the plywood moisture content. And so I ran it again for, I don't know, 3 years or something. and it just went up slightly even more over 3 years. Oh, wow, okay, so I did 20 years. And by the 20th year, the moisture content in the plywood was at mold decay levels. So, but it took it almost 20 years to get there. So that's why you have a start calculation period and an end calculation period. So right now it's doing, set from, I'm going to change this to January, and I'm going to change this to 2020. So we'll just do 1 year. Okay. So just because it'll run faster. So that's the calculation period. And the numerics, you just want to leave these at their default condition, because these are set for the most typical common situations. We're not doing anything super complicated where we need to change any of this. So we wouldn't want to exclude any of the hydrothermal special options. We don't want to exclude humidity or the latent heat of fusion. We want to just leave all that where it is. And so generally you shouldn't need to do anything with this screen, but it is there. Okay, so that's climate. I mean, that's our control parameters. Next is the component. Okay, so this is where you input the data on your wall or your roof or whatever the assembly is that you're testing. And so on the left-hand side, it says exterior, left-hand side. Interior is right-hand side. So we're going to, before we build the assembly, let's look at the other tabs. So orientation, inclination, and height. So what are we testing? The north, are we going to be testing the north wall, or do we want to maybe go to the northeast because our rain is coming from that direction, our driving rain? So we'll look at the northeast. But the south is worth looking at too, because that's where the sun is going to be its heaviest, and the sun drives a lot of the vapor pressure on a building. So I'm going to change it back to south. I think that would be our most concerning position. Inclination, okay? If this is a roof or something that's not vertical, you would want to change the inclination to whatever that degree is. And then rain load calculations. So for the rain load calculations, if you want to use the ASHRAE standard 160, it's just a more accurate version of the simulation. You can use that, but it takes a lot longer to run. Or you can just use the weather file and then input your building height. Is it short up to 33 feet? Is it a tall building with the lower part up to 33 feet? Tall building, middle part up to 36 to 60 feet. Most of ours are probably in this 33 to 66 foot range, okay? And then leave these values as they are. The next two tabs, you won't change anything on the surface transfer coefficient screen unless, you do have a roof or a basement or a partition wall, but if we're using an external wall, we're going to leave this on external wall. We can make it wind dependent. I haven't used this before, but it's pretty complicated. Again, if you don't check that, it's just going to rely on the weather file information. You're not going to have any coatings on the exterior. You're not going to want to change the radiation. Again, it's going to use the information out of the weather file. So there's really not much of this that you would want to change because it's all set for the standard normal conditions. Initial conditions. So this would be initial moisture in your components. So how much moisture is in the components when they're installed. So the default is a constant across the component, and we've got a relative humidity of 80%. Most plywood and absorbent materials that show up on a job site are going to have somewhere around 80% moisture content, because they're just out in the environment and so forth. So which is a lot, but you want to start out with a lot because you want to see that your wall is going to dry out. And then the initial temperature in the component, 68 degrees. That one is not important because it will change very quickly, based on what's happening with the environment. All right, so, again, you really shouldn't be changing anything on these last two tabs. So we'll go back to the assembly. And so here you have a material database, and you have heat sources that you can add to your model. And then you have, you can just create new layers or duplicate layers or so forth. But so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a new layer. So now you can see we have two layers. So let's add another layer and another layer. Let's say we have brick, airspace, rigid insulation, vapor barrier, and drywall. Okay, so let's start on the outside, and I'm going to double click on this, and this is going to take me to the WFI directory where all the materials are listed. And there should be something in here that represents what you're looking for. And you can search those materials up here, or you can just come down to the North American database here. And then you can look at, you've got building boards and siding, concrete, insulation materials, masonry materials, membranes, soil, stucco, woods, and so on. So we're going to go to masonry materials because we're looking for brick, right? So I click on that, and I have an old brick, have all these different types of masonry material. So I'm going to choose a red matte clay brick. And it tells you the density, the porosity, and all the physics-based behaviors of that material. And we're just going to assign it to that tab. It came in at 9 inches thick. We're going to say it's 3.5 inches thick.
65.
Sorry?
3.625.
Really? 3.625 inches thick. That's our brick. Here we have an airspace. So on this one, airspaces are in the generic materials air layers. So 120 millimeters without additional moisture capacity, which means that the air is humid. It's already saturated. So I'm going to pick the worst condition. I'm going to assign that. Oh, that's too thick. Let's do
50.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's got to be closer to 2 inches. So.
There's 1.96, 50 millimeters. So we'll assign that airspace. Okay. Then the next one is our rigid insulation. So I'm going to go to insulation materials, and I'm going to look for extruded polystyrene. Did I pass it? Here it is. Extruded polystyrene. I'm going to add that. I'm going to change its thickness to 1.5 inches. Okay. So you can see I'm building the system here. And then I'm going to put in a vapor barrier or retarder here. Double click. And membranes. So here's that Tyvek basically. Spun, bonded, blah, blah. It comes in with the thickness that you need. And then we're going to have, what did I say that was? Insulation, barrier. This will be, you don't do the studs. Yeah. yeah, sheeting. So here we'll do,
OSB. We'll have some winter.
woods, right? No, I don't want to do that. I want to do boards and siding, fiber, cement, OSB, Richard. Oriented strand board. So you have a high density and a low density.
It's good for the generic one, but and
Oh, didn't see that one. Okay. Generic. We'll assign that. It's 0.4921 inches. And then we need to add another layer. So this one is going to be our gyp board. Building boards and siding. There it is. Gypsum board. We'll assign that. Now you can also drag these and reposition them right here on the screen. You can just click and drag these materials to put them wherever you want. Okay?
you put that earlier for the stud cave.
I did a, you mean on the other side of the,
Between the sheathing and the sheathing.
so put it here. Whoops.
Sometimes doesn't the insulation have a factor if there's bad insulation?
Well, I'm not showing that, but I can. So if I insert a layer here, new layer, I'm going to move that over to here. And I'm going to go to insulation materials and
That insulation is just fine.
there's a bat somewhere that's, there used to be a ASHRAE bat insulation. Let me see. I want to search for bat. Here we go, North American low density fiberglass bat insulation. And I'm going to make that, that's 3.5 inches thick, so 3.5 inch stud wall. All right, so we have our assembly here. So that all looks good. And then the next step is that you run the simulation. So this little icon right here says run calculation with film. What the film is it's basically the recording so that you can watch it. You can watch it over time. So I'm going to click that. All right. And this is a little picture of the wall showing the initial conditions. At the top, the red line represents your temperature. The purple line represents your relative humidity, and it's equal across all materials starting out. The green is your, the red is your dry bulb temperature. The purple line is your dew point. So where those cross, you have condensate. The green line is your relative humidity. On the right, it's starting off at 80%. Down at the very bottom, you see this little blue line. It looks black here. That is your water content in percent mass. Okay. So, and then all your materials are listed across the bottom, the thicknesses, and there they are. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit the play button. And so you can see the clock moving, January 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. So it's doing like a day every 3/4 of a second or so. And at the top, it's showing you, I'm going to slow this down a little bit so that we can get a better idea. So the red arrows at the top are showing you which direction your heat is moving through your wall. The blue line represents the humidity traveling through the vapor pressure. Which direction is the vapor pressure traveling? So at the top, we can see our temperature is fluctuating based on what's happening outside. Your outdoor temperature, you can see it moving, or your BTUs per square foot are moving up and down on the left. That's coming from that sun chart that we were looking at. And when the little yellow sun pops out right where my cursor is, that's when it's sunny outside. So it's doing day and night, day and night. So that pops up and goes away. And then across and down at the bottom, you can see that our our relative humidity is moving up and down in the brick at the exterior side of the brick, and it's kind of staying pretty steady. But we're looking in January here. We're at the end of January. Not a lot's happening inside the building. Our relative humidity is at 40%. It kind of goes up as it goes through the wall system, but we're not seeing anything dramatic here. Our water content is very low, and you're only really concerned about the water content in organic materials and your insulation, if it's fiberglass. So your gypboard, your plywood, anything that can hold moisture, you want to keep an eye on that, and you really don't want to exceed 12, ideally 12%. Could maybe get away with 14% if it dries out frequently, but you kind of want to not be over 12% in any of your materials. Thinking and remembering, we started off with 80% relative humidity in our plywood. So I'm going to speed this up now so that it can finish. And it's going to move really fast here. So now it's doing several days a second. And you're seeing more of your temperature and humidity fluctuations throughout your material. Over on the left, this is the rainfall, and it's showing you how many inches per hour are falling, but it's doing a day very quickly, so you're just seeing flashes of blue there. If you slowed it down, you might actually see it hold in there for a while, an inch an hour or whatever, and that's based on historic rainfall data. So I'm going to speed this up a little more. And we just did 1 year here. So when you do 20 years, it can take it like 30 minutes to run. Okay, so it's finished. It's done, and it looks like a pretty good wall. Yeah. So here, when you hit close, it's going to tell you, it's going to show you your calculation time, how long it took, number of convergence failures. If that number is under 500, don't be worried about it. Check for numeric quality. Again, it's not critical for interpreting the data. All right, water content, pounds per cubic foot. Total water content in the wall starting out was 0.28. It ended after 1 year at 0.23. So that tells us that we have a decrease in our total assembly moisture content. It got as low as 0.16 and as high as 0.29. So that means that, if it does get a little damp, it's drying out, right? And then below that, you have water content per layer. So looking at the brick, starting and ending, we don't really much care about the brick as long as it's not getting, super high, because the brick dries out pretty fast. Your air layer, great, no problems. Extruded polystyrene, just what you'd expect. It doesn't really absorb any water. Your OSB, it ended lower than what it started, but it did reach a maximum of 5.2, which was what it started out at, so it didn't exceed that. Your Tyvek, your bad insulation, that looks good, ended lower than where it started. And then your gypboard, again, that looks good too. So then your heat flux and your hydrothermal sources, nothing there to see. All right, so now here's where you can look at your materials in individually.
Any of those previous numbers, what's that all relative to? Because when would any of those indicate that you've got an issue?
Okay.
Do a bad one.
We'll do it.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do a bad one. We'll do a bad one.
It's really important.
Yeah. So this is we're looking at the clay brick, and the timeline is across the bottom. The percent water content is across the right-hand side in terms of percentage, and then the pounds per cubic foot is on the left. We just look at percentage is really all we need to look at for these types of studies. So what we can see is that the brick, is starting off over here to the left, and it's just, progressively going down until it sort of finds a happy medium. Let's go look at the air layer. So our air, started out, went a little higher, came way down in the summer, started going back up in the winter, which is what you'd expect. Extruded polystyrene, again, it's below 1.4% on the upper right, so not really worried about that. OSB, this is one you would want to keep an eye on. Okay, so we started off in the winter, humidity level dropping, but it started off at over 12%. That's not a place where you want to be with organic material. Okay, so we started off at 12% up here, but we came down to a really nice, 7% or so, and then as it comes out of the summer, it starts going back up, approaching 11%. So I might run this another year, possibly. Your Tyvek, your bad insulation. So this peaks. It looks like this peaks end of December or so here, and then here, right here. But we're really really low percentage, less than 3.64%. And then our gyp board. This is one you want to keep an eye on too. But super low, super dry. 0.47% is really really dry. Again, 12%, you start getting concerned. Right? So what I want to do here is I want to go back to the components and let's do something bad. Let's take out the polystyrene. Delete. Yes.
Change it from Tyvek to something back on. I'm on the bill. Pick a modified vision thing.
Okay.
Feeling sort of like.
Okay. Here's a vapor retarder. 0.1 perms. So we'll take that and we'll put that in its place. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and change the control. I'm going to run this for 2 years. 2022, that's 3 years. Let's do that. Okay. And I'm going to go back and run it again. I'm going to overwrite my results, and I'm going to just let it go as fast as it can go. You can see here where we applied the vapor retarder that that's where your humidity and water seem to be stopping. When you see this blue line jump up, especially, that's when you're getting to a condensate. And whenever your red line and your purple line cross, that's where you're hitting condensate as well. That's the dew point. The purple line's the dew point, boom, right there. You see the water shot up right here. Okay? So I'm going to close this.
Is that one of those convergence points earlier summer?
Yeah.
That's the dew point.
Right. All right, so what does this tell us? Let's look at the total water content ended higher than it started after 3 years. So 3 years of simulation, we ended up with more moisture in our envelope than what we started with. But if we look at, let's look at our individual materials here. I usually just go right to the stranded board oriented strand board. It actually ended lower than it started. So, you know, that's good. Low density fiberglass picked up moisture, and the gyp board was drying out. So let's look at the individual materials. Let's look at the strand board. So this is, again, this is 19, 20, 21. This is 3 years of time. Started off above 12%, ended at 9%, which is, that's okay. So this wasn't as bad as we're thinking it might be. But our insulation, I mean, that's pretty steady. You know, that's each year is pretty steady. We don't see any sort of a continual increase or decrease, but we might want to look at it over a few more years, actually. And then our gyp board, which is fine. You know, you want to see consistency from year to year without a steady rise in moisture. So let's make it worse.
Just move that air, the vapor retarder, put it on the inside behind the drywall.
All right, so we move the vapor barrier over to between the insulation and the drywall. And depending on your climate, you know, if you're in a really northern cold climate, it's going to change where that vapor barrier goes.
Can you change from Norfolk to like Louisiana?
Yeah.
Amazon.
So where am I? Climate. Let's go to New Orleans. There. And then let's run it for New Orleans. And you can go back and watch these. It makes a recording that you can watch. You can make a video of it and send it to somebody or whatever. All right, so water content started off at 0.28, ended at 0.21. That's total. Oriented strand board looks okay. Yeah, it's not that bad. Let's look at the materials.
Get rid of the vapor barrier completely. See what happens.
There's our, here's our strand board, our fiberglass insulation, and they're all decreasing. All right, let's go back to the components, get rid of the vapor retarder. Just wonder what happens if we get rid of the brick.
If it's still a good wall, I'm going to question this. Wait a minute.
Like
Change the brick.
growing.
Change the brick to like a.
Jimmy, stop and do the hotels. Do the hotel.
The hotel?
Yeah, put the vapor retarder on the face of the gyp, out the face.
Oh, face.
Inside the face. Final wall.
Oh.
This doesn't break it in the program. You'd be ready.
We want both, right? Tyvek plus a.
Yeah, Tyvek's not doing
Hey,
it.
Jimmy, can we get pizza?
Yeah, get your pizza.
All right.
Yeah, that's fine. That one.
and put it,
Right where it is.
right where,
Right where it is.
on the inside of the chipboard?
That final wall curve.
Oh, okay. I want to change this, hang on a second. I want to change this to old brick.
Yeah.
We're still New Orleans.
Should be having mold growing.
Mine is really high. Oh, that does look bad.
Like an unfinished
Feels- Yeah, this probably is not going to have good results. Where did this happen?
Every hotel across the country.
Really, that's what they do?
Well, the Cavaliers, wallpaper down is black. But down in Baton Rouge in New Orleans, they.
Look at the OSB. Look at the OSB. It's 21% when it ended.
Show that material graph. This should look like what you hope your portfolio looks like.
Okay, so I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go to the quick graphs. I'm going to look at the content and layer, and look at the OSB. So over 3 years, it rose. By the second year, it had gone up to 18% or so. I'm sorry, no, 30, 40, approaching 49%. Exceeded 49% by the beginning of the third year, and it's probably going to keep going up over. If we ran it for 5 years, 10 years, we might reach a point where that OSB is just completely saturated. But at the OSB, when it exceeds 12, 14%, you're getting mold. So this would be like obviously a red flag. And if we look at the bat insulation, again, that's accumulating moisture in the bat, which means it's going to be in the back of your drywall. And there's your drywall. It's above 12% by the end of the second year. Middle of the second year, you have mold growing by the second year. So that is what other things do we have to look at? There are other things we can do with this. We can add heat sources. So if I go back to the components, and if this were a roof, for example, in fact, I can go to the orientation inclination. I'll change this to 45 degrees. Let's say this is a roof. And where was my external wall? We'll change this to a roof. And assembly monitor position. So this brick will become
Shingles?
Slate.
slate.
Terracotta.
Slate doesn't show up.
The under natural stone,
Natural stone.
just up.
Maybe those Germans don't use slate.
Patch. Would it be like, it would just be clay, right?
No?
No.
Oh, well, it's gotta have it in here somewhere. I mean, let's do this. Let's look for stone. Sandstone. Limestone. Okay.
All right, do that.
It got value evacuated.
So I don't think the shingles will do anything. The shingles are,
Hopefully
they don't,
they're in the water.
they just stop, well, they divert water, but they don't divert vapor and things that matter. So you probably wouldn't take the shingles into account, actually. So let's do,
Can you make it up? Can you make up materials or
you know,
import them or? If you knew all those properties.
let's use a metal deck. Okay, so metal deck, and then underneath the metal deck, we would have insulation. Let me add a new layer. I want to put it over here. And there, we're going to make that insulation. I'm going to use the expanded polystyrene, no extruded polystyrene. We'll assign that, and we'll make it a 2-inch, maybe an inch, just do an inch. And then we have the airspace. We'll make that 1.5 inches. And then we have strand board. Actually, the strand board would be up with the insulation, wouldn't it? Be up there. Airspace. And we would have another metal deck, wouldn't we? Here, we wouldn't have that. And then we probably have another airspace in here, new layer. We'll call this a generic material, air layers. We'll do like a really thick, we'll do 130 millimeter airspace, 5 inches. We'll change that to 12 inches airspace. And then we have the vapor retarder, that would be out here. And then we have our jip board. So if you flip this thing 90 degrees, you know, your layers are metal deck, extruded polystyrene, vapor retarder, oriented strand board, airspace, another metal deck, and your air layer with that additional moisture capacity, and your...
So just like a metal roof with vapor retarder underneath the metal, on top of that insulation. Burn-proof here.
All right, so then we'll run this. See what it does. What valid input thickness layer 8? Layer 8.
Is there anywhere that lets you just see it in a list? Like,
Yeah, that's what I'm looking. I think there might be. Is it added assembly by table? Okay, so I click the table button. Layer 8 is it's nothing. Delete that layer. Oh, you know what? I didn't assign it JIT board, I think is what happened. Let me go back to graph here. I need to assign that as a JIT board. There, that's what was wrong with it. All right, so, and when you do that, I didn't mention this earlier, but when you look down at the bottom, it tells you your total thickness of the wall and your thermal performance. So this is your thermal performance, R value and U value, but if it's a wall, it's between the studs if you're using wood studs. So that's where the simulation is occurring. It's two-dimensional, and it's through a slice in your assembly. Explicit radiation balance disabled. Okay. So somebody was asking, can we do this on a roof? So this is a roof that we're looking at, tilted at 45 degrees, metal. And that vapor barrier appears to be doing its job. So we started off at 0.23, we ended at 0.13 for the assembly. For the individual layers, everything looks really good. Nothing went up over time. And virtually no moisture got beyond the oriented strand board.
Is that still moving?
Mm-hmm. Wait, I might have changed it back. Let me see. Did I change the? That's still New Orleans.
It looked like in Maine.
Burlington. It gives you that message whenever you incline 45 degrees or more. It doesn't calculate, it calculates the sun differently, and it eliminates some of the weather, solar gain. Play.
So what this isn't doing is telling something about thermal performance. This is a very wimpy insulation.
Yeah, it should be get some condensation in that system. There's not enough insulation. Metal roof. It's warm enough when you get condensation.
This is showing condensation on the, well, definitely on the surface. I'm trying to remember it. Our metal deck. Here. Metal deck, vapor barrier, through polystyrene, down, down, down. Oriented strand board starts off at 12%, never gets close to that again. You know, it gets damp, dries out, collects moisture, dries out. Air layer.
Is this in Maine now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I still think we get some moisture.
Where would you expect it, Richard?
First surface underneath the polystyrene in that oriented strand board. There's not enough insulation in that. I'll say on the other side of that.
Peaking in June.
How many
12.
conversion points did you have?
How many what? Conversion points? Let me make sure, let me see here, where was that? I have to run it again, I think, to get that. Let me see, it's over here. What it says.
The green on the bottom, the range of moisture.
Humidity, that's your humidity range. It's not showing any condensate.
What is the spike in the line?
Here?
Yeah, when it spikes up or down.
What this is saying is the humidity through the materials changes between these two materials, between this air, and then I think we have some steel in there, that it, for some reason, it jumps up at that particular point where it stopped. 24 convergence failures. So it's 1 o'clock, but back to here, you know, you could add if I select that airspace, you can make that a heat source if you wanted to. So if that's a heated attic, for example, you could just say that whole layer is spread area, initial depth, whole layer, source, okay. No, wait, you have to select a surface. The way that I have used this was air changes. So if it's a ventilated, let me abort this. If I come over here and choose this air layer, if that's a ventilated space, then you can add a sink and use an air change to show that you have air moving through it. And through the whole layer, we would do a constant of, probably, the air is moving through that space at probably, maybe 2 or 3 feet per second, foot per second. Maybe it takes it a minute to change, to come in and go out. So let's say we did 50 air changes per hour. That would be reasonable. Mixing with the air from the left side, so that's outside, and then say okay. Okay. So now we have a source of airflow, humidity, heat traveling through that space, and we can see how that affects anything. But just because we have condensate,
As long as it dries out.
it doesn't mean it's a problem as long as it dries out. Condensate's an issue when it accumulates. So none of these numbers look bad. There's our strand board. So it's, you know, it's gaining moisture. It's definitely getting some moisture, but it's not going up to 12%. It's just barely over 9%, but it dries back down to, you know, 6%. So, you know, there's not a constant elevation in moisture content. So, you know, that would be considered, you know, performing well. Air layer, metal deck, air layer. Something happened around April or so. And your chip board looks pretty consistent. So that's woofy. It takes, I don't know, a couple hours to get comfortable with it, maybe. And, so I'll have it put on the graphic station so that anybody can use it. And there's no password or anything needed. So this is an annual license. We have one license, but that's all we need because it's not used by a bunch of people all the time. So any questions?
So when is this required and when do we do it as a matter of standard practice?
So it's never required.
From every project,
Yeah, well,
to know what you're doing.
yeah.
Otherwise, you're gonna end up getting sued sometime down the line because you didn't know what you were doing.
Code does not require it, but best practices does require it. You know, it's, I mean, I forget the project that, I'm trying to remember what that project was where at first glance, the wall seemed to be okay. There was just this slight increase in the chipboard. And then when we ran it out, it was like 20 years down the road, it was going to be a real problem.
Well,
I'm like, well, after 20 years, we're not liable, but, but you know, good design, responsible design, healthy design says you wouldn't build something that is going to eventually fail. You know it will fail. What were you going to say, Becky?
make a lot of decisions on Purdue, especially when they were pushing back on, you know, cheap. It helped us at least say, okay, we're not going to be in trouble if we don't use the exterior insulation.
Right.
Because,
Yeah.
you know, we were cheating the energy code because they made us do that.
Because they left out the rigid insulation.
But we were at least able to run it, and it told us to put craft-based insulation on that. Remember?
Right. And that was so that it could breathe, I guess. Well,
We needed that vapor barrier on the inside.
Right.
And that helped.
for that climate, that
Right.
cold
I mean,
climate.
So we went back and forth on many different iterations. It helped us, and then tell them why, show them the data.
I think it's particularly important for us because we design all over the country. And every climate, you know, all the different climates have, you know, different repercussions based on where you put vapor barrier or retarder, what the perm value is, what the indoor conditions are. And I mean, you know, if we design all of our projects right here in Hampton Roads, we would pretty much know what to do every time. But because we work in every climate zone, we should test every single assembly, roof and wall, on every project. Just due diligence, and you know, it's good to have that documentation. So, but if you know, if any of you want to use this software, I'll be more than happy to give you a, you know, when you have your first project, walk you through the process and show you how to do it. And of course, I'll always be happy to do it for you. But definitely your first one, let's do it together so that we can just make sure that you're making all the right steps. And then if you do one of these, make sure that you review the results with Richard or Jean. Richard has seen this a lot. Jean knows how to use it herself. She's been through training with me on it. Becky's pretty familiar with reading the output as well. So just make sure that you get a second set of eyes on the results to validate that the long-term results are what you expect. And until you get really comfortable with interpreting the output. So the software, I want to say the software is like $5,000, something like that for a 2-year license or something, but it's worth it, you know, because it's a liability prevention sort of thing.
Is this system, the software, assuming that most of your building, like when you do that analysis, it's going to be classed that way, or it's going to be your wall system is going to be like that for at least 50?
You're looking at
That's every.
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's just a slice of the building that you're working
Right.
on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you would run this for every time you have a different,
Different cladding or different,
yeah.
Yeah.
And you should do it for every orientation.
That would be a good idea to do it for every orientation, and again, you just go back to orientation, and you can, I think you can just click it up here like that. Yep, and then run it for the. We're still looking at a roof in this particular one, but you can run it for that orientation, and because especially for a wall could definitely be different for different orientations. You've got your wind-driven rain orientation here from the northeast, but you have your high-intensity solar facing south. So I would look at my worst rain condition and my worst solar condition. Those are the two I would, at a minimum, the two that I would run. So, well, you all know where I am. If you have any more questions, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Jimmy? Your question is, Jimmy.
Yeah, we'll start using this